好的，谢谢大家今天过来参加我们 MuckerLab 的活动。那我们今天也很高兴的邀请到Impact Cafe 还有 At Purpose 的 Founder Taylor Scobie。我们今天会大概讲到很多关于他的内容及创业的路程。那在此之前，我先简单的介绍一下 MuckerLab。MuckerLab 是2012年从美国洛杉矶南加州开始成立。那我们从加速器起家，那我们做的这个成绩也很不错，所以我们在全美算是最佳早期创业加速器的前几名。那我们后来也有自己的基金，所以我们也是一间创投叫 MuckerCapital。我们现在第5期基金主要是投资跟辅导在软体跟网络相关的早期新创。不过任何的产业都会看。那我们现在一半的 portfolio 大概是 B2B， 一半的 portfolio 大概 B2C。那我们主要是看从 Pre-C、C 跟 Series A 这早期的部分。当然，如果我们自己投资的 portfolio 如果他们做得很不错，我们也会继续一直投资到它出场结成。对，所以这是我们 MuckerLab。那我们在2年前的时候也来台湾。今年也正式的这个成立在台湾这里的加速器所以我们也开始投资辅导台湾以及亚洲的公司。So, thank you for coming, Taylor. It's a pleasure to have you.
Yeah, no worries. Happy to be here.
You being a long-time friend with Taiwan, you studied here in Zhengzhi University, and then started your own business. And it's quite a successful one. You even meet the ex-president of United States of Impact, and that's the company now you created. It's called Impact Coffee. I will let you talk about that. And I know you are right now doing your own startup again, and that's an exciting journey. So why don't you just briefly introduce about yourself for our Taiwanese audience?
Yeah. So I've lived in Taiwan for almost 10 years now. I moved here in 2013. I got a scholarship from the Taiwanese government to do my MBA at Zhengda. They were like, hey, we'll pay for your living expenses and your tuition. Come and do an MBA. That was a really easy decision for me to make. I was living in Canada. I'm Canadian. I hated the job I was doing. I wanted to leave the country desperately. And as soon as the Taiwanese government was like, we'll pay you to come here, I was like, yeah, that's amazing. So I moved to do my MBA 2013. In my second year of the MBA, I entered something called the Hult Prize. The Hult Prize is the biggest global business competition, basically student competition. Every university fields a team, basically. There's about 35,000 teams a year who participate. And it's a social business competition. It's a competition to come up with a business that does good, and every year has a different challenge. And in 2014, the challenge was education. And I had come up with a business to build schools in poor communities, basically, through local products. And we ended up winning. We won the Hult Prize in 2015. So we took a $1 million prize home from the Hult Prize Foundation and Bill Clinton and the Clinton Global Initiative. And so that was what started Impact Coffee. And
that's a worldwide champion, right?
Yeah. I mean, we ended up, we didn't expect to win the whole thing, but it got a little bit out of control. And so it was a crazy year for sure. It was just, I had no plans for what I was going to do in my life after the MBA was done. And then this happened and I was like, okay, I guess I have to build a company now. If I've got $1 million, I got to build a company. So
you're being humble.
No, it was unexpected, to be honest. And it was so funny because so I had 3 co-founders with that company, Impact Coffee, as part of my Hult Prize team. And I remember when, one of my co-founders, before it even started, came to me in class and said, hey, we're thinking of doing this Hult Prize thing. Do you want to join our team? And I said, well, I don't know what that is. I've never heard of the Hult Prize before. And B, what do I have to do? Like, I don't even know what the challenge is. And they're like, we have to come up with an education business to help kids in the developing world. And I was like, I don't know anything about education or kids or any of this stuff. I mean, I have a finance background and a philosophy background. And they're like, well, we want you because you're always the person in class who's happy to argue with everybody. And we think like you'll make a good presenter for this business because we know you will like really advocate hard for what we do. And I said, okay, well, let's go for it. I didn't think it was going to be very much effort. I was kind of just like, oh yeah, we'll put together a little business plan. It'll be a couple hours, whatever. And it turned into, a whole year of, 80-hour weeks, basically trying to, build the foundations of this business. And then finally we ended up winning. I think we beat 31,000 teams that year. There were almost 200,000 people competing. So
yeah, it's really a prestige award around the world. I think it's a high stake. A lot of different companies or organizations, even United Nations, they are watching that. So I think winning these awards is really, really a great award and also experiences. Right. Would you like to talk about what's the Impact Coffee and what's the concept behind, and how do you make social impact?
So Impact Coffee, the Impact Coffee concept kind of developed over time. When we started the Hull Prize, it was not meant to be a coffee company. It was a company that was meant to invest in women to build schools. So we came up with a way basically to, in really poor communities, take women who were maybe running like small daycares out of their homes. Now we're talking, communities where people are making $1 or $2 a day, like real urban slums, they would be called, really poor communities. And so it was common in these communities that a local woman would, take care of some kids because parents would go to work and they'd send their kids to this woman and they'd pay her 50 cents a day, $1 a day. But it wasn't education. It was just the woman was watching the kids. They would watch TV or something, if they had a TV, but probably not. And then we kind of had the idea that we could take these women who were running these small daycares, taking care of 2 or 3 kids, and basically turn them into school owners, that we could invest in them capital to build a new building, to get them teacher training, to buy them materials so that they could actually run a small school instead of a daycare. And the way this would work was, instead of taking care of 2 or 3 kids with no education, she could take care of 10, 15, 20 kids with education and kind of scale up that revenue that she was making before. And then she could pay back our investment into her. And then we could take the money and we could go do it again. That was kind of like the base concept that we had. And then it turned out that we were building these schools all in coffee growing countries, El Salvador and Guatemala and Honduras. And then so we came up with the idea that, to fund the investment, we could take this locally grown product, coffee, sell it, and then invest as much as we could back into building schools in the community. So Impact Coffee was just source coffee, sell it, take 25% of our sales, use it to build schools in this sustainable, investment-driven way. And we could get our money paid back, which was awesome because it meant that we could run a brand that did real good. A lot of people were kind of 1% for the planet. I'm going to donate 1% of my sales away. We were doing 25%. So we looked really impact driven and we were doing real good. But then we weren't actually less competitive because of it, because we would actually get the dollars paid back. And so we were doing good in this really new sustainable way that no other brand had ever done before. Impact programs for brands up until that point were always donation driven. And we were the first people to build one that was impact investment driven instead. So
Interesting. And I believe that every startup initially it's quite challenging. And from 0 to 1, from 1 to 10, even to 100, even for like any software internet related companies, it's challenging. I think for social enterprise, it's probably even more. Right? Would you like to share more about your founding journey and what are the challenges, what are the lessons learned, so that our founders can learn from your experiences?
So I think the answer is that the challenges were every challenge you can imagine and most challenges you can't imagine. Building a startup is something that I think like a lot of times when you hear people's startup stories, they're coming from people who were, relatively successful. And then when they tell this story, it maybe seemed much easier than it actually was in reality. But the reality of building a company is that it's 99% incredibly hard and incredibly discouraging. And there's 1% of these like small victories that keep you going. And that's like kind of life. But it's hard because even when you have the small victories, like the next hour you get an email that's like something's gone horribly wrong, we need to fix it. And then you kind of, I would say that, again, I think entrepreneurship has because of the way it's marketed, I think people think it's easier than it is. But actually it's really really brutal. I mean, every single thing from, building a founding team to keeping them together and raising money and, actually building the business and selling it to people and scaling it up. Every single one of these things is super difficult. And I think the hardest part about it is there's probably no case study for your specific business. So there's no kind of, oh, I encountered this problem, let me go read about how to solve this problem, because it's very likely that problem is kind of unique to you and your business. Yeah. So it's the kind of challenge where there's no guide to it. I have my undergrad is finance. I also have a philosophy undergrad. I have an MBA. Theoretically, I have 2 business degrees that should prepare you to run a business, and it doesn't at all. And I think there is no education that can really prepare you to build a startup, because all the problems are so unique, and the problems you have are never the ones that you expect to have. For us, it's like, well, we expect to have problems with physically building the schools and permits and this and that. But then the actual problems you have are like, okay, there's a hurricane coming in that's going to destroy. What do you do? So you never thought about hurricanes, right? And that's, I don't know. It's just, you definitely always keeps you on your toes. But I think, company building is something that really requires a lot of grit and determination. You have to be the kind of person for whom setbacks don't really matter to you that much. You have to really be able to get over no's quickly. Something goes wrong, you get a no, it doesn't matter to you, you just keep moving forward. I think the best entrepreneurs are ones who are kind of almost a little stupid and clueless. Like they're just going to do it regardless of what happens to them. And that's kind of the person you need, because if you get discouraged too easily, there's just so many, roadblocks in building a company. In Impact Coffee, we had, we over the last 8 years of building that company, we probably had, it was probably 4 or 5 different companies. At one point or another, we had totally different business models. We were doing totally different things. And then it's like, oh God, the thing we're doing is not working. Well, now we got to figure out something else to do. And then we would move on to the next thing. But yeah, we had problems with fundraising. It's like, oh, we've run out of money. What are we going to do now? Okay, well, we have to fire staff, and oh well, we've got to let go of one woman who just had a new baby because we can't afford to pay her. And it's like, okay, well, that's not a fun position to be in. And these are the kind of, situations like you find yourself in as an entrepreneur. But you just have to kind of, if you have enough belief in, I think, the vision and what you're doing, it's easy to get past them. And I think you mentioned, we're a social enterprise. We were an impact-driven company. Although I think it is harder to build impact-driven companies, in a sense, it's easier because the impact of what you're doing kind of fuels your ability to do it. Right. You're not just trying to build something that is going to make you richer. You're trying to build something that really genuinely helps people. And we saw this, and I saw this when we built our very first school. It was over the summer when we were doing the Holt Prize. We knew we wanted to do our final pitch having actually built a school to prove to people that we could do it. So we went and actually built a school in El Salvador. And I remember sitting in the school. We had built it. It was the first day of class. And it was a really poor, really dangerous community in one of the most dangerous countries in the world. And seeing kids in class getting an education where they never would have had that chance before was just kind of life-changing for me. That's always the thought I have in my mind when something goes wrong. It's like, well, it doesn't really matter because I just get to do more of that thing, And I think that's unique to impact businesses. So.
That's true. Wow. There's a lot of things going on within these 8 years, and you being from the beginning, forming the team, and then pivoting, and then striving business and so on. So at the end, I think it's quite successful. You even meet Clinton, right? What's the feeling there?
Oh yeah, that was when we actually won the Holt Prize. They kind of announced our name, and we were a little bit in shock. And we got to go up on stage, and Bill Clinton handed us the huge check, the big novelty check for $1 million. And I'm sitting here holding this check. I'm like, what am I going to do? To be honest, I was like, I was half obviously super happy. It was very cool, but I was half really worried, right? Because it's one thing to propose a business, to do all the work, to think about what a business would be. And it's another thing to build a business. Those are very different things. Yeah. And as soon as somebody gives you money, you kind of have to actually build the business. And then you're like, oh God, what am I going to do? It's going to be a disaster. Because again, I had never built a company before. I had never hired somebody. I had never sold a product. nothing sets you up for that stuff. And so in the back of my mind, when I was on stage with Bill Clinton getting this trophy and this big check, that's what I was thinking. I was thinking, oh God, what am I going to do? Because I actually have to do this thing now. So.
Right. More responsibility and accountability and a lot of meaningful things going on. Mm-hmm. Interesting. Right. So I can see that you're quite determined and you're pretty brave as a Canadian coming to a foreign country in Taiwan, study and then start your own business and then win the big prize and then doing this social good, just helping the people in the foreign countries, right? I think that's quite meaningful. Probably that's the belief that you keep doing no matter which kind of circumstances. Is that correct?
Yeah. So I don't consider myself a determined person or a brave person. I'm the kind of person who just I don't know better. Like I'm just going to keep doing the things that I think are worth doing, and I don't think about what if this goes wrong. It's not like I think bravery is when you're afraid and you can overcome the fear, but I'm never really afraid. I'm always just thinking, yeah, sure, it's going to go fine, right? And if it doesn't go fine, I'll figure out something else. But I think for me, the reason why the idea of kind of social enterprise or impact-driven businesses is compelling in the first place is I always kind of tell this story, but so when I went into my undergraduate education, I'm Canadian from Calgary, University of Calgary, good school. I was like, I'm going to go into finance and I'm going to become an investment banker and I'm going to be really wealthy because investment bankers make a lot of money. And that was my plan, and then it was funny because business school, it gives you the chance to do a lot of options. You can add like elective classes. And I started adding philosophy classes, which is totally not like business, obviously. It's about the opposite. But I loved the philosophy classes because they were about the meaningful questions, And I added philosophy options and then a minor and then a major. And then I added a second degree in philosophy and I did my honors thesis. I actually wrote an undergrad thesis in philosophy. And then I graduated and I was sitting there thinking, I cannot go work in finance because that is just the worst thing for the planet. I'm making rich people richer. My life has got to mean more than going to be an investment banker, even if it pays me, right? And I've always had this kind of idea that I've been really lucky in life. I got to be born in Canada, middle class, great family, paid for my education. I've had support my whole life. Everything I am is in large part because of how lucky it was I was born how I was, right? And a lot of people don't get that luck. Actually, most people don't get that luck. And it's weird to think that we have a world where you roll the dice and some person's born in Canada and another person's born in Africa, and that determines 95% of what happens to you in life, right? And so I've always tried to say and do, I want to take the luck I was given to make luck matter less for other people. And I think social enterprises are so cool because it lets kind of talented people build a world where it doesn't matter where you're born, you still have a lot of the same things as if you were born somewhere really amazing. So that's always how I look at everything. I've been lucky. I want to use that to help other people not have to be so lucky in the future. So.
Right. Oh, that's a great one. Right. So interesting. So you've been coming to Taiwan and then build out Impact Coffee and then pivoting a little bit. And then you probably also see a lot of different social enterprises and different innovation landscape about the innovation, about ESG and also sustainability and so on. So would you like to share what's your point of view on what's the ESG or sustainability innovation landscape?
This is an interesting question because I've been very lucky. After I won the Hult Prize, I get to judge Hult Prize competitions. I've probably seen maybe 1,000 social enterprises over the last 8 years from teams from all over the world. I've seen teams from the middle of Africa. I've seen teams from Stanford and Harvard. The most interesting thing about the Hult Prize is Ivy League universities never win the Hult Prize. It's always universities, because it's so funny because when you ask people to build impact-driven businesses for vulnerable people, a social enterprise is something that helps the bottom of the pyramid, right? Ivy League university people can never come up with good ideas because I think they're too far out of touch with actual poor people. So the best Hult Prize teams are always the ones who actually understand the problem, which is really interesting. But so I would say that there's a difference between a social enterprise, which is a company that is built to scale impact through a business model, and ESG programs. ESG programs are, if you don't have a social enterprise, the kind of thing you can do to still help a little bit, So there's kind of a difference. I mean, social enterprise, there's always tons of innovation in the social enterprise space, obviously, just in the sheer fact that you could take things that have been built out as services for Canada or the US or Taiwan and figure out how to build them out for El Salvador or South Africa or wherever it might be. And that's kind of a social enterprise because you're bringing a valuable good or service to a context where it doesn't exist, and that's fine. There's tons of amazing models these days, social enterprise, alternative proteins, people growing crickets and flies I just talked to a company yesterday who it's a dog food brand, but every one of the snacks and the treats is made out of an alternative protein that's actually super environmentally friendly. So they actually make it out of crickets and flies and all this stuff. Because for dogs, it's actually more nutritious and it takes like 1,000 times less water. So there's always super cool things going on in the social enterprise space. But this is kind of the presentation I was going to give was I don't think there's actually a lot interesting going on in the ESG space. Because if you look at there is now a little bit, but if you look at the history of ESG, CSR, corporate social responsibility, was kind of the original term for it. And that was coined by a guy in 1953. In 1953, a guy, I think it was from the University of Illinois, said, hey, maybe companies should be responsible to society too. And we're going to call that CSR. 1953. And his idea was, well, companies should kind of, pick a cause, some kind of good they want to do, and then, spend some money, spend some of their profits to do that kind of good, right? And that model is still exactly what we have for companies today to have CSR. ESG is kind of the new cool way to talk about CSR, and it kind of means the same thing. But this idea of let's pick a cause and let's donate away money to do it, that has been the paradigm in ESG for almost 70 years now, actually just almost 69 years. And now, you've got kind of a new focus, whereas in the 50s, you wouldn't be talking about carbon offsets, obviously, because nobody knew the world was boiling. But now, you're talking about, let's go carbon neutral. And so the focus of CSR programs have changed, but I don't think the mechanism has changed. The mechanism is still doing good has a cost. We pay that cost out of our sales. We don't do it very much because if we pay too much, then we're not competitive anymore. That's just what CSR programs have been for the last 70 years. And I think the cool thing about social enterprises is they've realized that doing good doesn't have to be a cost. It can be the thing that scales your business, right? That in some way you can link together the good you do and your sales and scale them at the same time. Whereas an ESG program says, well, I'm going to sell something and then as a trade-off, take a little bit and do good out of the sale. So I think they're kind of different things almost.
Right, got it. Okay, interesting. That's interesting insight. So I guess because of that insights, you like to make sure what company do and the CSR or sustainability do is not a trade-off, but they are doing actually the same thing. So you are currently doing your own startup right now. It's called A-Purpose. Right. Would you like to briefly introduce what it is and then how to help the companies?
Yeah, I guess to kind of set this up, again, this distinction between a social enterprise and an ESG program is, although I hate this guy, I don't like Tesla. I'm going to use Tesla as an example. I don't like Elon Musk. I don't like Tesla as a company, but I'm going to use them as an example. Tesla is a company that is in some way a social enterprise because every car Tesla sells is one gas guzzling car that's not on the roads. And its product is intrinsically something that does good every time one gets sold, right? So Tesla don't really need a CSR program because just selling more electric cars is doing some kind of good, right? Whereas if you look at like kind of other companies that might Ford or something, Ford has a product that doesn't intrinsically do good. I mean, it mostly just guzzles more gas and, accelerates our climate Armageddon, which is something we don't really want. So Ford have a CSR program that's meant to kind of balance out the impact their product has on the environment, whereas Tesla doesn't need to balance out their product, their impact on the environment, because their product already does that, right? So so I think ESG programs and CSR programs are for companies who don't have some intrinsic impact. Although, I mean, Tesla does have a small CSR program because there are other aspects to what they do that might need canceling out, or they just want to help build stronger communities or whatever, right? Totally fine. But mostly CSR programs are for brands that we're a brand, we have a product, we're a normal business, and we also think we have some responsibility to others. Now, I would say that CSR programs, ESG programs, are becoming almost mandatory for companies. I think Asia is lagging behind a little bit here, but if you look at the United States, for example, the S&P 500, in 2011, only 20% of the S&P 500 had a CSR program, and last year it was 93%. So there are now no companies on the S&P 500, well, there's like 3 that don't have a CSR program. It's just because it's become the kind of thing that customers expect, especially younger customers. Younger customers really, they're probably not going to buy from your brand if they think your brand is actively harming the planet. And they're probably going to buy more from your brand if they think your brand is actively helping, right? And so CSR programs have really been fueled, their adoption has been fueled by younger customers, basically. And now if you look at new brands, so not the S&P 500, but smaller and smaller brands, smaller and smaller brands now have CSR programs because it's hard to start a new brand that isn't telling a sustainability story these days.
Yeah, indeed.
And I think for what Ad Purpose does, the reason I kind of mentioned that CSR programs haven't really changed in the last 70 years is very much the dominant paradigm is still, we're going to pick a cause, we're going to plant trees, we're going to offset our carbon, we're going to donate to a charity. We pick a cause and then we donate dollars away to do it, or we spend dollars. And those dollars are a pure cost, right? If you're going to do 1% for the planet, you're going to donate away 1% of your sales, and you're selling $100 million, well, that's $1 million that is now a pure cost to your business, right? I mean, it's a cost to do good, but it's still a cost. Dollars you're never going to get back. The really interesting thing that I saw over the last 8 years with Impact Coffee is that, both our model was you can invest and do probably more good and get those dollars back. So I don't know why anyone's donating anyway, you can impact invest. But a lot of the impact world itself, if you look at how the biggest organizations in the world are doing this, the NGOs, the World Bank, the governments, they have all moved to an investment approach versus a donation approach. A lot of the coolest impact organizations now use impact invested dollars to do good and can actually repay them. I mean, impact investment is very much the new paradigm in the impact world. And brands, Impact Coffee, I think, was the very first brand to actually build an impact investment based CSR program. But brands other than us never really got the memo that there was this better thing that they could be doing, that instead of donating dollars away, they could be investing dollars and getting them back. So, Ad Purpose was really, it kind of was the evolution of Impact Coffee. Impact Coffee was, well, we built one brand that invests to do good. Why can't we build a platform that lets every brand invest to do good? And Ad Purpose is really just that thing, quite simply, that if you're a brand and you want to do good, we can help you do it through impact investment in a way that gets your dollars paid back. And the power of this is, if you could only donate away 1% of your sales, you can probably invest 2, 3, 4, 5%, because if you're going to get it back at the end of the year, you can justify a larger investment into doing good. So we help brands do more good, get the dollars back. And very specifically what we do is we put the customer in charge. So if Jerry, you went and bought from one of our brands and they were going to invest 10% of the sale, well, you would actually get that 10% to go do something you care about with. And then as the dollars get repaid, you would get them back to spend with the brand in the future. So Ad Purpose is really the idea that we can turn brands and customers into, co-investors into the world's highest impact projects and make this all happen more sustainably, where the impact doesn't have to be a cost. And I think that's the difference. I would say that we are the first true innovation in CSR programs, because we're the first people to say that, CSR doesn't need to be a cost center for your business. CSR can still do good, but get you the dollars back. And that's kind of I would say our innovation in CSR.
That's very interesting. Yeah, I understand that currently a lot of younger generation, they do care about ESG, sustainability, impact, cost, and so on. So a lot of them choosing their purchase behavior based on that, or the companies they like to work for. So that's actually the customer behavior right now. And before you mentioned that a lot of enterprise, they are when they do ESG or CSR programs, they are it's based on their own enterprise-centric choices. But right now, you allow their customers to decide what kind of impact the company should invest on, and allow them to have better, I guess, customer loyalty, and also investment ownership for the customers, and it's also better for the enterprise too, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, if you think about it, there's actually, so again, the traditional model is I'm a company, I'm going to plant trees, so I'm going to donate 1% of my sales away to plant trees. But then I want my customers to know that I'm planting trees. Well, how do I tell them? Well, now I have another 1% of marketing spend that I have to use to tell my customers that I've planted trees.
The CSR report, everything.
Well, and so famously, there's, companies take out Super Bowl ads. Super Bowl is the big football thing in the US every year, like the most expensive ad space. And a company's ad will be like, oh, we donated away $500,000 to plant trees this year, but the ad itself cost $8 million, right? So we've got these ridiculous CSR programs where there's more cost to communicate them to people than there is cost to actually do good. And so kind of the idea behind allowing the customer to make the choice is that if the customer makes the choice of how you do good, you don't need to tell them what kind of good you did because they did it, right? And so it kind of removes this chunk of marketing cost. And also, I mean, it just engages people more, right? When you think about, so again, let's take a big company, they're going to donate away 1% to plant trees. Okay, well, what percentage of their customers really care about planting trees? Some probably, but not all. Everybody really has a different idea of what doing good looks like. And when a company chooses a cause, they're saying, I'm going to kind of really resonate with some of my customers, but the ones who didn't care about planting trees, this was kind of wasted for them, But if I was building schools, I would have resonated with a different set of my customers, but probably not the people who wanted me to plant trees, right? So by choosing a cause, you're kind of not really reaching each one of your consumers with an impact message that they really care about, right? It's much better to say, hey, customer, you just spent your dollars with me. What kind of good do you want to do, right? Because then it activates me around the things I care about most. If a company says, hey, Taylor, what do you want to do? I'm going to say, I want to invest in education because that's the thing I'm passionate about, right? I'm going to be much happier when I got to make a choice to invest in education than if you made a choice for me to go plant some trees. Trees are great and all, but they're just not the thing I care about, right? So I can quickly actually show you on the customer engagement point, because this is, I'll share my screen here. So I mean, this is our obviously ad purposes presentation for brands. I wasn't actually going to bring this up, but I mean, it's a good, interesting question about customer engagement. So,
sure.
Ad purpose at a very kind of basic level lets a brand choose a percentage of their sales. So let's say 10%, just for easy math. And if they sell something to a customer worth $100, ad purpose captures that 10%, $10, and gives it to the customer to invest, basically. Says, hey, customer, impact invest this in something you care about. We're going to give that choice to you. And so what we've found is that when you give the choice to customers, about 15 to 30% of all customers will make a choice of how the dollars are going to do good, basically. Some customers are just not that motivated by impact, whatever, but for this 15 to 30% who actually do take the dollars and target them themselves, the change in customer behavior is actually crazy. So we went back and we looked at the last 10,000 transactions that had flowed through ad purpose from our 5 biggest brands. And basically what we did is we compared the group of transactions where the customer targeted dollars into a cause and the group of people who didn't target dollars into a cause. So we had about 2,000 transactions that the customer took the dollars and did something they cared about with them. And we had about 8,000 transactions where the customers just ignored the choice and said, no big deal. I mean, the results were kind of shocking. We found the consumers that target dollars, if your brand gives the consumer a choice about what kind of good they want to do, those people spend 53% more on average for every purchase than the people who don't target dollars. This is probably the biggest way to increase average order volume I've personally ever seen. I'm just letting people make a small choice of impact actually gets them buying more from you. And not only this, these people, they actually buy 30% more frequently than the customers who don't engage with your impact program. And I mean, when you think about building a brand and what's hard about it, the hardest part about building a brand is acquiring customers that are repeat purchasers, right? Because when you're thinking about, well, I have a customer acquisition cost, well, I mean, my LTV has to be higher than my customer acquisition cost. And often the best way to increase LTV is to have people who come and buy 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times, or are true repeat purchasers. And we found that.
And just add one comment: LTV is lifetime value.
Yeah, lifetime value. And so we found that the simple addition of allowing your customers to make an impact choice took any given buyer and made them 2.4 times likelier to become a repeat customer of yours. So taking people who only would have bought once and turning them into actual kind of repeat fans of the brand. And this is kind of a, just a little stat. When you kind of add all these numbers together, the customers that will engage with your impact program, if you give them a choice, they're worth about 2 times as much in LTV on average as customers who don't engage with your impact program. So basically the ability to just go and add this small choice for your customers takes 15, 20, 30% of your customers and doubles their value overnight, basically. It's pretty crazy. And if you look at kind of, this presentation doesn't have my other term. So anyway.
Wow, very interesting insights. Yeah, I guess that makes sense because people feel engaged and having the ownership of the company, and then they trust more, so they're going to purchase more.
Well, I mean,
so
you're always trying to activate your customers, right? I mean, the whole point of marketing is to get closer to your customers. You want to deliver them a message that they care about, right? There's if you have a coffee company, for example, there's so many different stories you can tell to your customers. You can say, oh, this is the best coffee. This is the cheapest coffee. This coffee comes from here. This coffee is sustainable. And what the impact choice being given to the customer does is it means that you don't have to kind of fly in the dark with what kind of marketing message you need to give to your customers, because you've just put them in charge of it, right? You've said, well, whatever story we were going to tell you, we're going to plant trees. We don't need to tell you that story anymore because you're going to drive the story, right? It's almost like a marketing hack. And it's funny because before we had built Ad Purpose, there's always been a lot of talk about how kind of sustainability minded customers are better customers than, that there's some vague data out there that customers who care about impact buy more and they buy more often and they're more loyal. But it was never backed up by any actual data. It was just kind of a guess by everybody. And so that's why we actually went and looked at our data to see what whether it was true that people who care about impact actually do buy more, which it is true. But then we were shocked about how much more true it is than we we were even stunned at our numbers. We thought carts were going to be 10, 20% bigger for the sustainability minded customers, but they're 50, We thought that there was going to be a small repurchase effect, but it's actually massive. And so it really goes to show how there's customers out there who, if you just have the right story for them when it comes to doing good, they will support your brand, with bigger purchases, with more frequent purchases. And this is awesome because it shows us that the way to build a relevant brand in the future is to have one that is defined by doing good. And I think that the fact that that's now where we are as a planet is actually really promising, because you now can't get away with building not impact-driven brands, not sustainability-driven brands, because they are less competitive than ones that are sustainability-driven, right? When you think about marketing, you got to spend $100 to acquire a customer. Would you rather acquire a customer who buys once from you, or the sustainability-minded customers who are going to buy twice, 3, 4 times, right? It kind of makes a lot of the math different for brands if only they have the right kind of impact program. So,
interesting. Got it. So, on a final point of view, would you like to summarize like what the brand's enterprise can get, what's the benefit they have, and what's the customer can have, and what's your vision like in 10 years for Ed Purpose?
Well, yeah, I mean, so I'll start with the vision. I mean, the vision is really, so just in the USA alone, last year brands donated away about $40 billion. That is a lot of money, obviously. Yes. They donated that money away without any engagement from their customers. It was just like, we're going to go do the things we want to do, and here's $40 billion. Our vision is to take most, if not all, of that $40 billion and convert it from donated dollars to invested dollars, and to convert it from dollars that don't engage customers to dollars that do engage customers. And I think Ad Purpose, I mean, there's the value proposition, but simply is dollar for dollar, I think we do more good. A dollar invested, I think if you look at the research and development economics, simply does more good than a dollar donated. So even if you just want to do good, it's probably better to be investing rather than donating, right? A dollar invested can become repaid. And so as a company, you can invest more dollars than you could donate. So we want to take the companies who are doing 1% and get them doing 5%, right? We want to multiply the dollars companies are using to doing good. And we want to put customers in charge, because frankly, the people who buy from you, they're the ones supporting your brand. It's their dollars who are paying your bills. Why should it be your choice of cause? It should be their choice of cause, right? So we want to take those dollars that are donated and put them into the hands of buyers to do what the buyers care about, and then kind of build in this really radical kind of benefit to the brand of having those buyers buy more from the brands that do the most good through us. And so, our vision, if I kind of, very shameless about it, is just we want to become the biggest source of impact capital in the world. And we think that all the LPs of this kind of impact fund we're building are brands and their customers. And we get to fund the world's coolest impact projects through this mechanism. So,
wow, that's exciting. Thanks a lot for sharing, Taylor. Right. And right now, I think we've touched about who you are and also your entrepreneur journey, including the Impact Coffee and also Ed Purpose that you're currently building that. And it sounds exciting. We have some of the attendees, they are asking questions here. Let me just check. So one of them is asking, so you were in Taiwan for some years, right? 8, 10, 9 years, right? And you're building a global companies, including Impact Coffee and also Ed Purpose. And a lot of founders, they are also in Taiwan. They are thinking also building up a global company. Would you have any recommendation on how to overcome the gap, and how do you do it?
Yeah, so my best bit of advice is for any market that you plan on expanding into, you need local knowledge. You need somebody who really understands the market from, not only a business perspective, but also a kind of social and cultural perspective. I think where a lot of, Taiwanese companies fail is Taiwan often generates startups that build really good products, but then doesn't know how to talk about those products in the US or Canada or Europe or whatever. That it's kind of a failure of marketing, because, and this is something I learned, the way marketing is done here is radically different than the way marketing is done in Canada. And I learned this the hard way because we started building Impact Coffee in Taiwan, where we had retail cafes and corporate sales program and everything. And I would do the marketing for us. I would write what I thought was compelling marketing. And then all my Taiwanese staff would be like, Taiwanese people are going to hate this. This is just not the way that we market. And I realized that it's because I have some fundamental lack of understanding about the cultural standard for marketing here, right? And so if I was a Canadian building a company in Canada, I would have failed at marketing it into Taiwan unless I had Taiwanese staff, basically, to actually do the job. And I think this is very true for Taiwanese companies looking to market into Canada. you need somebody who understands the local standards, the cultural standards, the business standards. That's, I think, the biggest thing. I think a lot of companies fail because they think they understand more about a market than they do. I think they kind of need people to actually help with that. But I mean, honestly, like we failed in all sorts of ways here in Taiwan, and when we expanded to the U.S., we started this company in Taiwan, obviously with cafes and corporate sales. We expanded to the U.S. to San Francisco, and actually it was really funny because we had struggled for a long time in Taiwan. They were looking for, but as soon as we went to the U.S., where people were like me and I kind of understood people more, it was so much easier to get traction because I found myself getting to have conversations with people who are kind of culturally similar, and the way I talk just resonates better with those people. But I remember when I was doing like meetings here in Taiwan with fancy CEOs and whatever, I would end the meeting and my staff would be like, "Oh, you said something you shouldn't have said, or you were playing with your business card and it looked really bad." And I'm like, okay. So I just warn kind of local founders that there will be things about a market they want to go into that they don't understand, and they probably will never understand unless they actually get somebody from that market. It's really, really important.
Yeah, that's true. I think the marketing is all about customers and understand customers, and know the segmentation, and also the targeting and with the value-added things. I think that's quite important. But the first local culture understanding is quite important. Right. Interesting.
I think that Taiwanese startups have a huge advantage in that there's a lot of very smart people here. Actually, I think there was just an article that came out a couple of days ago that Taiwanese people are the second highest IQ in the world. I think or it might have been number one. It was number one or number two. And I was like, oh, it's not that surprising. So I think there's lots of really smart people here. There's amazing engineers. It's not a high cost environment to build a business. Like if you want to hire an engineering team in the US, you're going to pay 5, 6, 7 times what you will in Taiwan. So you've got smart people, a great ecosystem of talent. Like you've got all of the kind of bits you need to build a competitive business. It's just always that marketing aspect that I think kind of holds Taiwanese companies back. It's too many smart engineers building cool products and not enough kind of culturally sensitive marketing types to actually tell the product stories. I think this is, one of the reasons that, like HTC, the phone company, was famously struggling to kind of grow worldwide, is they would build cool products, but then not understand how to actually tell those stories in foreign markets. And I think it really, really hurt them. So.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, there's a lot of case studies in MBA, I guess.
Yeah.
Right.
But that's all we do, case studies.
Yeah, indeed. Let me check if there is any other questions here. Right. Okay. So besides, okay, there's one. So besides what you currently do to the end purpose, right? Enabling the brand to do impact investing from their own customers. Any other interesting innovation that you see from the ESG or sustainability innovation point of view?
Yeah, so we Ad Purpose is really cool because we get to work with organizations that we can invest into to do good, and there's a lot of really very innovative organizations we're working with. A really cool one is it's actually a company. It's a social enterprise called Running Tide, and they just raised a huge Series B, like really oversubscribed. And what they do is they sink carbon into the oceans, basically. So they have this technology where they set up these. They're called buoys. They're buoys, like a buoy is something that floats in the water, basically. And I think they're made out of calcium carbonate or something. Anyways, and so they set up these buoys, and these buoys grow microalgae. And the microalgae is one of the best ways to kind of take carbon out of the atmosphere and sink it into, the algae. And then when the kind of buoy is heavy enough, they just sink to the bottom of the ocean. And then that CO2 is stored forever, a mile beneath the water. And so this is actually a company that kind of we are letting brands invest into to sink carbon, because it's really cool. Because it's a company, it's actually an investable technology. It's the kind of thing that you used to do through charity, but now they have a way to do it through kind of a business mechanism, which is really, really cool. But for me, I think a lot of the most exciting things in ESG now are innovations in sustainable packaging. A lot of the kind of plastic-free packaging is really super promising. Plastic's obviously a huge issue. Innovations in sinking carbon. To be honest, like if you were to ask me, like, what are the top 5 most important kinds of good for a company to be doing? 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 would be sinking carbon, because if we don't have a livable future, nothing else really matters, right? I mean, we kind of need to address the climate crisis first. So the things I'm most excited about are mostly like cool technologies to actually, fight climate change. But there's amazing alternative proteins and plastic-free things, and there's great models for building schools. And I mean, people don't realize how vibrant the social impact space is. For any kind of good you want to do, there are thousands of people out there with really cool kind of business models to make it happen. And I think this is so promising because, and not to get nerdy about this, but if you look at the effectiveness of charity over the last 50, 100 years, there's actually not a lot of good evidence for charity being kind of fundamental solvers of impact problems. Charity often kind of helps in the short term, but never really fixes a problem over the long term. And I think this kind of new notion that we can do all these kinds of good, but through businesses that are durable and scalable and kind of things that will generate impact on an ongoing basis is a good transition that we're currently making. So I think, for me, a lot of the innovation is we've figured out kind of scalable ways to do the things we used to do really unscalably through donations. There's this great movement in kind of started in the philosophy space, but now it's gotten bigger. It's called the effective altruism movement, but very much the idea that we need to be doing as much good as possible as individuals, as companies, as societies, governments, and whatever. And I think that we're beginning to see new ways for, again, individuals, companies to actually take dollars and do more good with those dollars. Because I really think that solving a lot of the world's biggest problems is not a like number of dollars problem, it's an allocation problem. We've got a lot of dollars doing a lot of things that aren't really helping. And those same dollars could be doing things that could fundamentally solve problems. And I see kind of ad purpose as a business that gets dollars away from the things that are probably less efficient ways to do good and get those dollars into the ways that are more efficient ways to do good. And I think, again, the fact that we now have those more efficient ways to do good is, I think, what's promising. I mean, technology will either solve climate change or it won't. I really have no faith in kind of mass action to come together to do what we need. I really think we need to be investing heavily in the coolest technologies to solve the problem. So that's what we get to do as ad purpose.
Interesting. We definitely need to add purpose for a lot of different things. So that's how you call it name, right? Add purpose.
we're not very creative. So we were thinking, okay, well, what do we want to name our business? Well, what does it do? Well, I mean, it just helps companies add purpose to what they sell, and it helps customers add purpose to what they buy. And so we're like, we'll just call it ad purpose. Just the easiest.
That makes sense. Yeah. Thanks a lot for sharing. And on final notes, do you have any like one sentence recommendation for the founders and for the customers, the users, like anything you'd like to share?
I would say for founders, building a company will be the hardest but the coolest thing you will ever do, for sure. I talked earlier about how difficult it was to build Impact Coffee, how difficult it's been to build that purpose, but I would not have changed it for anything in the world. If you had come to me on my worst day building Impact Coffee and said, I'm going to pay you $1 million a year to come work for Google, I would have turned you down for sure. Because just knowing that I was doing something that was my own and really mattered just overcame everything else. So although it will be very hard, you probably won't regret it. It'll be the best thing you ever do if you build a company that means something to you. So that's generally my advice, that the challenges are worth it for doing something, I think, really meaningful.
Yeah, that's true. That's quite a useful advice for founders. And Thanks a lot again for your sharing, Thailand. It's great pleasure to have you and understanding your journey and your experiences. And it's great to have you also in Taiwan, building out the companies together.
Yeah. I'm trying to, so after 10 years here, I consider myself, maybe 25% Taiwanese now. So I view this as my home. And just like when I won the Hult Prize, I was proud that I got to win the Hult Prize as a Taiwanese university, because I think there's so much to love about the country, and we just need more people putting it on the map. And I'm happy that I get to do a small kind of bit there. So
great, thanks a lot. And finally, MuckerLab in Taiwan, we are also helping a lot of different startups and companies here. If you are interested, welcome to apply. We have a link just beside here. Welcome to apply. So thank you very much, Taylor and everyone, for your time. I will see you soon, man.
Thank you.
Thank you.